Welcome to this December session of Awe, Ageing with Expectation. My name is Graham Adamson. I'm the coordinator of Awe, and today I have the pleasure of introducing not only Dr. Francis Macnab, but also our special guest from the USA, Rev Dr Steven Koski. For those of you who don't know Steven, I'll give you a short rundown on his interesting career. In 1988, Steven completed theological studies in the USA and then moved to Melbourne. I believe he virtually got up from the exam and hopped on a plane. That might not be quite right, but it was pretty close to it. For the next 2 years, he was the assistant minister to Dr. Macnab at the then Collins Street Uniting Church at 120 Collins Street, Melbourne, now known as St Michael's, of course. And there a lasting friendship began between them. In 1990, he moved to Adelaide and became the minister at Brown Place. And Steven, whilst there, also started a branch of the Cairnmillar Institute and became a sought-after speaker around Australia and was awarded the Speaker of the Year by the Australian National Speakers Association in 1999. Then in 1999, Steven moved back to the USA, firstly to serve a church in Chicago, and he has now been the lead minister at the First Presbyterian Church in Bend, Oregon, for now 14 years, and he earned his doctorate in 2003. Like Dr. Macnab, Steven seeks to advance generous and progressive theology that embraces psychology and science. So now, without further ado, I welcome you all, and let's hear from the two eminent men that we have to speak to us today.
So I can't even begin to say what a pleasure it is to have this opportunity and how delighted I am to carry on should I give a year, an over 30-year conversation that we've been enjoying, Francis. Our topic today is aging well with gratitude. So I want to begin by just expressing my profound gratitude, Francis, for the role that you have played in my life, the role you continue to play in my life. I regard you as a mentor, a profound influence on my vocation, my thinking, just myself. And most of all, I'm just really deeply grateful for our friendship. The psalmist says, "I have set your feet in a spacious place." And from the minute I stepped off the plane and arrived in Melbourne to now, you have introduced me to a spacious spirit, a spacious mind, a spacious way of being in the world. And I am profoundly grateful. In fact, I have trademarked First Presbyterian Bend. Our trademark is we embody a spacious Christianity. And all of that comes from you. And I remember, I think it might have been my third Sunday, the moderator of the Church of Scotland was visiting, invited by Scots Church. But of course, somehow you managed to have him speak at St. Michael's first. And you couldn't just simply have him speak and then send him over to Scots Church. You had to arrange for Russell Street to be closed, for a red carpet to be put across the street. And then we led the moderator of the Church of Scotland across the street, being led by bagpipes. And that's when I knew that this experience was going to be completely extraordinary. So you opened me to just the value of imagination and exuberance and color and joy. So I just want to begin by just expressing my just profound gratitude to you and the difference that you have made in my life. And to get our conversation going, you remind us all how important, no matter the circumstances of our life, how important it is for our mental and spiritual well-being to be able to focus on those things that make us most alive and connect us to something greater than ourselves. So I'd love to hear, what role do you think cultivating a sense of gratitude plays in our well-being as we age? And what does gratitude look like for you?
What is gratitude? Well, you've described various aspects of your gratitude. My gratitude is expressed a little differently. It's expressed in terms of people, experiences, that is to say, memory of past experiences, and anticipation of experiences yet to unfold. Three things are there for me. And I gather together gratitude for each one and for all of them. So that's my feeling about it.
There's this image that I first came across by Forest Church, a Unitarian minister who spoke once at St. Michael's. He has since died of cancer. But during his journey with cancer, he came up with this image of life as a stained glass window. And there are various panes of glass that represent the various parts of our life. But as we all know, sometimes one of those panes of glass kind of becomes opaque. You know, we experience perhaps tragedy or something unfortunate. And then it kind of slowly becomes dark. And then we human beings have this tendency, when there's a dark pane of glass, that we stick our nose against that pane of glass because we're wanting to see through it. But when we move closer and we just become obsessed and focused only on the dark pane of glass and our nose is pressed against it, pretty soon we don't see any of the other colors, the other panes of glass in our life. The one dark pane of glass kind of takes over. And he says part of the art is to be able to tend to the dark pane of glass, because it's real, it's part of our life. We have to face it. So tend to that tenderly. But he says it's important also to step back and be able to see the other panes of glass, you know, where the light is coming through and there is still some color. You know, for example, I was speaking with someone recently with cancer. And he said something profound. He said, cancer doesn't make sunsets any less beautiful. It hasn't inhibited my capacity to love or be loved. So you wrote a profound book called Life After Loss that I know for a fact has really helped a lot of people. And it seems like one of the challenges in life is to hold our grief in one hand, not clutch it too tightly, but to hold it and tend to it, while at the same time hold gratitude. Those other colorful panes of glass where the light still comes through in the other hand. So loss is certainly a companion to aging. Certainly in 2020, loss is immense and people are experiencing loss in so many ways. In managing all of that, what role do you see? Well, first, I'd love your kind of comments on reactions to that image of the panes of glass and the dark pane of glass, but what role might gratitude play in dealing with the losses in our life?
The pane of glass is good, but we need, I think it's important to see that the pane of glass is coloured. And can we see the colours? In our grief, in our losses, we become so overwhelmed by that dark experience that we can no longer see the colours. So colour is very important in our gratitude. Can we see colour? The colours of the environment, the colours of people, the colours of various aspects of life generally. See the colour. And if we can see the colour, to celebrate it, to say, there it is, there it is, and it's good. And as far as it's good, I can feel good. So in other words, the colour is not just something that is there, it is something which affects us, and we are expanded by it, and we are enriched by it. So can we do that?
So that's beautiful. I'd be curious of what colors do you see? I mean, in a recent conversation we had, you talked about reading poetry with your grandson. I mean, how beautiful is that? So what other colors are you aware of in your own life that help you?
I imagine colours. I can envisage colour. I like to find the colour. I like to wear colour. We all wear colours. So can we give ourselves credit for being able to see colour? And not only to see the colour, but to actually affirm it and say, there it is. And we're part of it. And it enlarges us. All of us are enlarged by colour. If we only have one monochrome view of life, there it is. But there are multitudes of colours, from colours of the birds, colours of the trees, colours of the flowers in the garden, colours of the shirt we wear, all there. And we're to some extent enlarged, if not enlarged, then affected by it. We say, there it is, colour. So if we can do that, we've got something to be grateful for. We can see it. We're expanded by it. Life is better for it.
I must confess that for many years now, I've been trying to reach your standard of color in the vestments that you wore on a Sunday morning, and I have failed miserably. So I don't think I will ever quite get to that, to get to that sense of color and style. One of the things you introduced me to, and that has become a passion of mine, a love of mine, but you introduced me to poetry. And poetry has continued to play an important role in my own sense of reading and thinking and exploring my own spirituality. It certainly has played a role in my preaching. And you have introduced me, and I'm really grateful that you've introduced me to the richness of poetry. So I want to be audacious enough to to read you a poem from probably my favorite poet, and one of my favorite poems of hers, Mary Oliver. And I would love to read it to you, and I'd love to just then allow you an opportunity to respond to how this poem meets you. And it's called I Worried. I worried a lot. Will the garden grow? Will the rivers flow in the right direction? Will the earth turn as it was taught? And if not, how shall I correct it? Was I right? Was I wrong? Will I be forgiven? Can I do better? Will I ever be able to sing? Even the sparrows can do it. And I am, well, hopeless. Is my eyesight fading, or am I just imagining it? Am I going to get rheumatism, lockjaw, dementia? Finally, I saw that worrying had come to nothing and gave it up and took my old body and went out into the morning and sang. What do you think?
What did you sing? Did you have a song to sing, or did you just make it up as you went along? Sometimes we sing old songs without realizing that they're out of date. So it's important to have a song that speaks to the moment, speaks to us. So that's my first reaction to it. Is your song in tune? Or are you singing an old song out of tune? Because often we do just that. We're out of tune. And if you're like me, sometimes you forget the song halfway through. What do we do then? I can't remember it. Very common.
If the requirement is to sing in tune, I'm in deep trouble. Just want to be clear about that. Abraham Heschel, who you also introduced me to, the great Jewish philosopher. Abraham Heschel said the goal of the spiritual life is to live in radical amazement, to take nothing for granted, to be amazed at the gift and miracle of life itself, amazed at the gift of every heartbeat and every single breath. I love the story. A student asked a spiritual teacher, what is the harshest circumstance and greatest difficulty a person can experience on earth? And the teacher said, the worst condition, worse than anything else, is to be ungrateful. Because if you suffer from ingratitude, then it won't matter what blessings or goodness appear in your life. You won't see them, and you won't be able to receive them. Meister Eckhart, who you also introduced me to, the 14th century mystic, said the only prayer a person needs in their life is 2 words: thank you. So what do you think about those thoughts of defining spirituality as living in radical amazement and taking nothing for granted? And how, particularly as we age, can we embrace a spirituality like that?
Spirituality is a very difficult word and a very difficult experience. What do we mean by it? How do we come by it? And you speak as if it's important. So let's say, yes, it is important. So what are we saying about spirituality? First, it's an expression of something larger than ourselves. We're looking outside ourselves to something bigger out there, beyond us, within us. Secondly, it's speaking to our memory. Memory is an extraordinary attribute. Without memory, we don't know who we are. I can't remember who you are. But memory has a wealth of experience and possibility before us. So we need to be able to say, memory is there and it's good. Enlargement, memory, helps us to be who we are, be who we might be. And so, what do you think? How do you manage yourself in this regard? You ask me the question, I ask you the question.
I'm intrigued by this idea of radical amazement. Leo Tolstoy said, the only power you have is the power of right now. And it seems to me to just find ways, whatever that is, you know, maybe it's going outside for a walk. For me, it's my dog. My dog brings me tremendous amount of joy. It might be a nice meal that you're enjoying. Whatever those things are that bring you into the moment, where that you might remember that, you know, this day that we're living right now, this opportunity, I mean, gosh, the technology that is bringing us together right now, how amazing is that? And sometimes I just well, of course, I take it for granted. I mean, there it is. But to stop and just go, wow, it's kind of extraordinary. We're having this conversation. I can see you and you can see me. And that's what an extraordinary thing that is. And then to also remember at times, I was just diagnosed with a heart condition. And it helped me to remember that every heartbeat is sheer gift. Every breath I take, this one, the next one, I'm not guaranteed it. I shouldn't take it for granted. It's sheer gift. So I think whatever those things are that bring us in the moment, and you talked about enlargement, memory. Today is my father passed away 7 years ago, but today is his birthday. So I spent some time today thinking about him, but I was graced with the gift. He had Alzheimer's the last 5 years of his life. And even though at the end, he didn't have any idea who I was, I was the one of my siblings that had the schedule that allowed me to drop everything and to go be with him. And he and we had some issues, but none of that mattered. I was able to hold him and caress his forehead, tell him he was loved, and tell him that it'll be okay, and that he had nothing to fear. And so today, my memory of that, I'm just so profoundly grateful to have that moment with my dad. That just such a gift. So you're right, memory. And sometimes it's what you remember and how you remember it. I am choosing not to remember today some of the more challenging parts of our relationship. I'm choosing to remember what he taught me about hard work, resilience. But I'm mostly choosing to remember that I got to hold him as he transitioned, and for that, I'll be forever grateful.
So we've got two things happening there. The memory of what happened and how you can bring that memory right into the present. And so the past becomes something real for you in the present. And then you say, what's it doing to me in the present? It expands who you are. It helps us to be different by virtue of what's happened in the past and what is happening now in the present. And as we speak, we too are part of a past. But we can talk as if we're right present. Here we are talking and we're present to each other. So the memory is one thing, but to be actually present, to be present in person, but to be present in word, to be present in life. And in doing so, we are larger than life. Great gift.
There's a poet by the, well, you know, the poet Rumi, who you probably also introduced me to. Rumi said, now, meaning the present, is where love breathes. And I love that. That idea, the more we can stay in the present, we allow, you know, whether it be love or gratitude or whatever those good feelings are, those energizing feelings, those things that connect us, those things that are healing, those things that enlarge us. It's in the moment that love breathes. So gratitude, getting us back to gratitude for a second, and the role of gratitude as we age, sometimes is regarded as it's kind of soft and sentimental. I think gratitude is fierce. And I think gratitude is most important in these moments where it seems like there's very little to be grateful about. 2020. For many people, it's hard right now to find things to be grateful about. I think gratitude is most important in those moments. I think of scripture, God forbid that I quote scripture here. I hope that's not sacrilegious, but you know, that beautiful phrase where it says, give thanks in all circumstances. I'm really grateful that it doesn't say give thanks for all circumstances, because there's a lot of things I'm not very thankful about. But I think the challenge, particularly in the midst of this global pandemic, how can we in the midst of this somehow cultivate a sense of gratitude?
Interesting that you should allude to scripture, because two words in the scriptures for me are very relevant as we talk about gratitude. Gratitude is talking about what has happened to us, or what has come to us. But there are two words it says in the scriptures, but now. But now. What will we do with it? But now is the moment. But now in the present. Where will we go? And how will we live the present moment, but now? So I think that's important to say, bringing together our gratitude for the past and to embrace those two words, but now is our moment. But now we can do something different in the light of what has happened, or in challenge for what has happened, but now.
I really love those two words. It actually reminds me of the words of Rabbi Harold Kushner, who, this is becoming repetitive, who you also introduced me to. But Harold Kushner was talking about the death of his son. And he said, as the result of my son's death, I'm a wiser, stronger, more compassionate person. He said, I would give all of that back in a heartbeat if I could even have one more minute with my son. But I can't. And he used this image. He said, there's not a day that I don't think about my son like a tongue probes a missing tooth. But he said, my healing came, which comes to the but now part. He said, my healing came when I shifted from why did this happen, to but now. To, he says, he used, now that this has happened, how do I affirm life? And he said his healing came when he kind of made that shift from focusing on why to now that it has happened, what can I do today to affirm life? So to me, it's like like earlier, what we were talking about, he still holds his grief in his hand. You know, I think about my son every day, like a tongue probes a missing tooth. But he doesn't clutch that grief so tightly that it consumes him. He also says, okay, today, what can I be grateful for? How can I affirm life today?
It's easier said than done, isn't it? But now.
Yeah.
Yes, and I should have said the words. But now, easier said than done. How can we do it? How do you do it? How will we do it?
Shifting that thinking to 2020. 2020 has been a challenge for so many. How can we incorporate that idea of but now for 2020? I mean, has 2020 brought any unexpected gifts? I mean, here everybody talks about, when we go back to normal. There is no going back to normal. There's no going back. We can only go forward. My wife last year was critically ill. She spent 5 weeks she was life flighted to Portland and spent 5 weeks, most of that time on a ventilator in the ICU at a specialized hospital in Portland. They did not expect her to make it. At one stage, the doctor was suggesting that maybe it's time to make a decision here. She did make it. And amazingly, for the most part, has had a full recovery, which the medical people use miracle. I don't, anyway. But the doctor said after 2 months in the hospital and being released, the doctor said, healing is not going back to what was. Healing is moving forward to what can be. And somehow, as a result of this experience, becoming more whole, becoming stronger. I think of Parker Palmer, a writer, says, life is heartbreaking. We can either allow our hearts to break apart into 1,000 sharp shards spread across the floor, or we can allow our hearts to break open, wider, able to hold the suffering of others, able to hold more love, able to hold more gratitude, able to hold more strength, more wisdom. What do you think of that image of healing as moving forward, or even in 2020, the idea of not going backwards, but now? Your word often is thrive. A lot of people's goal is just simply to survive this year. How can we thrive?
The very fact that we are talking is something for which we can be grateful. What can we be grateful for? For good words. The words that we can remind each other of a broader picture, of a bigger picture, of a better picture. So good words are there, and we all have them. Unfortunately, we often use words to hurt or to belittle, but good words expand another person's life. Good words expand our life. So words are there for us, and we have plenty of them. Words, memories, colour, they're all there, occurring before us every day. But we often don't hear them, don't speak them, don't see them. So, walking towards another person can be a very important process, because for the most part we're just walking, or we're walking away from people. How do we walk towards another person with warmth, with positive intentions, with pleasure, with something to share or celebrate? Walking towards another person, perhaps remembering what had happened between us in the past, and now converting it to something different and new and better in the future. So although we tend to think, well, what have I got to be grateful for? As we speak, we've got the power of gratitude in our words, in our thoughts, in our memories, in the way we walk, and in the direction in which we walk.
When you talk about the power of good words, you clearly haven't endured 4 years under Donald Trump, but just want to put that out there. I don't think I've heard any good words from our president in 4 years, but I'll leave that to the side. I'm remindful, I think it's John Gottman, the psychologist, who said there are always 3 movements. We're either moving away, or we're moving against, or we're moving towards. So how can we move towards what is positive and hopeful? How can we, it's Advent, the season of Advent, where we contemplate this mystery that there is a light that the darkness is not able to overcome. Even when we can't see the light, even when it's so dark, it doesn't mean the light isn't there. So the question is then, well, how can we move toward the light? So, I mean, what are some of the rituals, perhaps, or practices that we can participate in during the season of Advent that might help us catch maybe a glimpse of light, that might help us move toward the light, or maybe even where we can be a reflection of the light in those dark corners. Another person and I can never get his name right, Nikos Kazantzakis. Am I close?
Katsantzakis.
Thank you. Well, what he said. So Nikos I can't do it. So Nikos was asked, what's the meaning of life? Without hesitation, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a broken piece of glass. And he says this glass came from a German, I think it was a German motorcycle from World War II. And as a boy, he used to play in the barn. And his game was to somehow position the glass to reflect the sunlight into the darkest corners of the barn. And every day he tried to get the light to go into even more dark corners. And he said, as I grew older, I realized that's the meaning of life. To be a reflection of light into the dark corners, near and far. So how can we move towards the light, or catch glimpses of light, or be a reflection of light in this Advent season?
I think it's important to realize that many people don't have that piece of glass. And so what can we do? Again, we come back and say, well, what have you got? What have you in your own very possession that can change the way you speak, the way you talk with people? And there they are, in words, the words that we use. There's one particular piece of literature that says, In the beginning was the Word. So we need to say that word can be sometimes put up on the mantelpiece, but the word is what is spoken between us. The word is something between. And as that word is spoken, the deadness of the word becomes living. Life flows between us as our words take on different meaning, as we give the words meaning. So again and again, I come back and say, what have we got to give? What have we got to experience? Our own words, and we can give words. And by giving those words, we all have the potential of enriching the wider human scene.
I think I read once that said the words we use create the worlds we live in. Change the words we use, we change the world. I remember my Hebrew teacher, the Genesis 1:1, where it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And my Hebrew teacher said, well, it actually doesn't say that. She has a PhD in Hebrew verbs and says, it actually says, in the beginning, God began to create and continues to create. And I love that because that suggests that somehow, and again, that's poetry, it's not science. The Genesis 1 is poetry. But what beautiful poetry. In the beginning, God began to create. Because what that suggests is that creative process continues. And maybe we participate with the creative energy that is present in the words we speak, in our actions, in our relationships, in what we can bring into the world for others. What are your thoughts about that interpretation?
Yes, I like it very much. We need to remember, of course, that one other great sage said, words are the source of misunderstandings. So we have to take care that we study the words we're likely to use so they become the source of understanding, the source of growth, the source of pleasure. So words can be both destructive and constructive, can be for growth and destruction. Study the words we use. All right, how can we then move to another area of our concern? Spirituality. Do we cover spirituality adequately? How can we cover spirituality adequately ever? But come back to this task of how can we, the people who are much concerned about the spiritual life, how can we help people to find that the spiritual life is part of our growth, part of our expansion, part of our best expression of life? What do you think of that?
I think a simple way to understand spirituality is, what spirit do you carry? What spirit do you inhabit? What spirit do you bring into this world? I mean, this is the time of year where we again read the poetry of the gospel writer John. The Word became flesh. So it's this time of year where we contemplate this weird idea of incarnation. But that's not just something that happened or didn't happen, or whatever fact happened, what in fact happened versus what in faith happened. But this whole idea about incarnation, that what if that's something we do? What do we incarnate? How do we inhabit spirit in our spaces in the world? And how can we inhabit a spirit that brings healing? How can we inhabit a spirit that brings hope? How can we inhabit a spirit that brings forgiveness? I'm living in a country now that is so unbelievably divided. So how can I inhabit a presence that might bring reconciliation, that might bring peace? I can certainly inhabit a spirit of anger and bitterness that increases the division. But what if spirituality is inhabiting that spirit that leads to reconciliation, that leads to healing? What do you think of that idea of spirituality?
You use the word inhabit in relation to spirituality. To some of us, we understand that language, but what do you mean by it? Do you mean, how do I demonstrate it? Do you mean, how do I show it, manifest it? What do I mean by inhabiting the spirit? What do you mean by that?
By inhabit, I mean, what is the spirit I carry, I convey, I live, I communicate, I share in my space? You know, my family space, my community space, my workspace. I know, for example, I have a morning meditation practice that I spend 30 minutes in silence. As the poets say, silence was God's first language. Everything else is a poor translation. I spend 30 minutes in silence and then I go walk my dog. I know when I don't do that, how I inhabit my space is really different than when I do. When I begin my day kind of grounded, there's a Chinese proverb that says, even the fastest spinning wheel is still at the center. I can inhabit the wheel spinning out of control. I can certainly inhabit that energy pretty easily. But when I take the time to inhabit stillness, my relationship to that spinning out of control is profoundly different.
I like your image of your dog and you walking your dog. If the dog could speak, and it does in its own way, what would the dog say to you? Are you listening to your dog? And what is the language of your dog? What does the dog say to you in your spiritual being?
What a great question. Because one of the things my dog teaches me is the beautiful way of being non-transactional. I'm obviously projecting on my dog, but he greets me with what I experience as exuberance and unconditional love, regardless of what idiotic things I do, regardless how long I've been away from the house. So there's this non-transactional nature about my dog that teaches me about spirituality. My dog seems to be able to just be present. I think in the present, we don't have in the present is non-duality. In the present, I think, is that sense of well, how we tend to live our lives, how we inhabit our space is, you know, what can you do for me? If you do this for me, then I'll do this back for you. Where the dog says, to me anyway, you know, who I am is I'm all about joy. I'm all about this moment. I'm all about loving on you. I'm all about having fun. And that teaches me a lot, actually.
I think that's good. That's good. I think the dog says 3 words at that time. Be like me. Be like me. Enjoy life fully. My dogs over the years have all said that to me, reminded me of it again and again. Be like me. live life fully. You only have it once. So live it fully. A dog is a great gift. And if you have anything to be grateful for, we can all be grateful for our dog and the message it brings to us.
I have a sticker in my office that says, if we all possessed the heart of a dog, the world would be a much better place.
Yes, good. Good.
Well, I just want to take this opportunity, just since we've talked a little bit about gratitude, just to express my profound gratitude, just to be able to connect and talk and have this conversation. And I hope in 2021, we might be able to have a few more.
So we've spoken about good things of the past, memory, and we've spoken about the present. And one word we haven't used, which has nevertheless been present, and that is mutuality. How do we discover the mutual goodness, the mutual pleasure, the mutual joy of life? So mutuality is something to celebrate, I think, and I thank you for it.
Well, thank you, Francis and Stephen, for a most enlightening and thought-provoking conversation. We went through a number of the topics. I've made a few notes and I thought I'll comment on these, but look, I think all I can do is just highlight those major topics again. The gratitude, the importance of being grateful, the colour that we can get into our lives if we really try to do so. The importance of poetry. And I particularly liked the poem I Worried. It was a completely new one to me. Not that I'm a great reader of poetry, but it certainly had a very, very powerful message to me. We then had a couple of goes at spirituality, and I'm quite surprised, or no, rather, I'm not really surprised that you finished up with no definition thereof, because I haven't yet heard a decent definition of spirituality. And you emphasised how much the only time we have is now. And then you said how important the two words were, but now. And I hadn't thought about that before, but by gee, I think you're right. Then we have our memories and our words and the importance of both of those. And with that, I'm going to say, Stephen, thank you very much for your contribution to this, and to you, Francis. I don't quite know how you managed to put up with this guy for so long, but he's worth it. And to all you out there, it is, if you want to hear a bit more about Stephen, he frequently posts on Instagram and Facebook inspirational reflections. And I'm sure if you just get onto those websites and pop his name in, they'll come up. I don't know how many there are already there, but there'll be more coming, I'm sure. And last but not least, this being the last session of all for 2020, I'd like to thank all of those of you who have tuned into us and wish you all the best for a very happy, meaningful Christmas and all the best for 2021. Thank you, and see you in 2021. Bye now.